Hello. So today we're going to be looking at async await, and specifically we're going to look at does it actually pause code execution? Because I suspect you can use async await, I suspect you do use it, but we're just going to take a little closer look and see that we understand what's actually happening. So I think the best way to do that is to kind of explain what the keywords do, or we'll investigate what the keywords do on their own. And then we'll see how it all works. So we've got some simple code here. We're basically just calling one function. It's not async, anything like that. So you know it's going to be console log 1, console log 2. Great. We're also storing the result of function 1 in here, and we're going to log it out. Now, I'm not sure if you know, if you don't explicitly return anything from a function, what comes back. But if you don't, we're about to find out. It is undefined. There you go. So a normal function without a return statement will return undefined. Is it relevant? A little bit, because what we're going to do next is we're going to add the async keyword, and we're going to see what happens next. Okay, so we've got a promise. Let's come back now. So all the async keyword does on its own is just make sure that a function returns a promise. So if it already returns a promise, that's great. If it doesn't, it's going to wrap it in a promise. So in this case, it's wrapped it up. The result is undefined because it was returning undefined before. Now, a question is that, has that async keyword actually made anything asynchronous? No, it hasn't. What's happened is it's returning a promise, sure, but that's getting instantly resolved, returning the value. There's no kind of asynchronous stuff going on, right? Now, what would be asynchronous is if we had this result. So remember, that's the promise that will be the promise that's getting resolved, and then we can just whatever in here, aside from that weird character, and then we'll do console.log a. All right, so then we're going to get the actually get the callback, the then sort of chaining, and now you can see undefined actually coming out there. That's being logged there. So now that we're using then, now that is asynchronous, right? Because you're waiting for the promise to resolve, and then after that you're gonna print out, in this case, undefined. So that's async. So that's just to say that just putting the async word, that doesn't magically mean everything in that function is going to become asynchronous. It just means that it returns a promise, and it has the potential to become asynchronous. So what would the potential to become asynchronous really mean? Let's have a look at then the await function. So what we'll do another function here. We'll call it function API call, because that's the kind of usual thing that you would want to do, isn't it? That you would want to await. Console log 3 inside API call. And then what will we do? We will actually await that call here. Await API call. And maybe we'll just put a return on here. We'll put return 1. Like I said, it will return a 1, but it's going to wrap it in a promise and resolve that instantly. So you'll end up with the value 1 coming back from this API. Cool. So now that we're using the await keyword, what's actually happening? So this is when we're really making stuff asynchronous. As soon as we use that await keyword, and we can only use it in a function that's marked async anyway, and then as soon as we use await, that says that this function is going to wait for the result of this function call here, this API call. It's going to wait until it gets a promise resolved from that. right now it's pretty much instant, but it could be, you know, a few seconds, but set timeout in there, or if it was an actual API call. But the important thing is it's like everything now is in a then. So we're saying wait for this stuff to get resolved, and then the rest of function 1, then you can carry on with it. So you can imagine that this is sort of blocking and that this is in a .then. So we're saying only when this is done, then run this. Okay, so maybe you already knew that, but let's have a look at what it kind of means for the code. And something interesting, we've got this function 1 down here where we're calling. So this, when it gets here, we already said it's going to block the progress of this function. So if we have a function 2 down here, just a normal non-async function, call it function 2, thank you, autocomplete, into console.log, there'll be 4, normal function. So now what's going to happen, considering that it's blocked here at this await API call, but we're trying to call function 2 after function 1. Let's have a look. Okay, so we've got 1, 3, 4, 2 in the code flow. So what is happening? 1, obvious, yeah, fine. Then we're going to call function 1. That hops into where we've got the await. So as we said, it's going to wait for this call. This is logged next, and that's because even though the await is kind of waiting for the asynchronous result of API call, this bit up here, this is just synchronous, right? It's still going in the function normally. What it's awaiting is the resolved promise, or rejected, whatever. So we're going to get that 3, and then are we going to get 2? No, we're going to get 4. Now, what's happened here is when we've reached this await API call, the waiting for the promise resolution is popped onto the Microtask queue. I've got another video, can't remember where I am on the screen, but I'll put a card up if you don't know much about Microtasks. But yeah, this await, this promise kind of resolution stuff is stuck on the Microtask queue. So that means that this is then offloaded and the stack can carry on. So it's just gonna go, okay, we'll put this on the Microtask queue, and then it carries on with the code. Function 2 goes in there, logs 4, then everything's over, call stack's empty, and it's going to check the Microtask queue, say, hey, is there anything ready? Ah, yeah, there is actually. We've got this resolved promise. Oh, cool. And I'm going to give you a 1, and then this function is saying, oh, all right, so I can carry on. And it does. So you get the result back there, and it logs the 2. Now, one of the missing bits there is about how this async function 1, can actually pause the code execution. I've had a look. I mean, the implementation, I'm not 100% sure, but I know that it can be done like using a generator. So the engine implementation, speak to V8 engine people or something like that. But I mean, it certainly wouldn't hurt to say that it uses generators. It's a combination of generators and promises. Let's say that for now. All right. Like obviously, if we want to dig deeper, that's like another video. But we can just say that for all intents and purposes, it has the ability to pause the code. It can just get to a part in function 1 where it sees an await and then says, okay, I'm going to put this function aside and I'm just going to carry on like normal. And that's what happens. So for the original question that we asked at the start, does await async, does it block code execution? Does it pause code execution? Yes, it does within the function that's being used. So is it blocking this console log whilst it's waiting for the result of API call? Yes, it is. Is it blocking kind of the thread? Is it stopping function 2 from being run? No, it's not. So it's only really pausing the code in the function that's being used. So there we go. That's the answer. It's basically blocking within the function that it's used. So I mean, something to watch out for would be if you're using like multiple awaits in one function. If there's another one here, obviously it's gonna block on each one. So if you say do this, you're waiting for the API call, the first one. The second API call is not even gonna start until the first one's finished. That's great if if API call 2 is depending on API call 1. If it's totally separate, they don't depend on each other, then you're just unnecessarily waiting. Cool, so maybe a shorter video than normal. That's probably a good thing, right? Thank you very much. Cheers, bye bye.